So if you're a young athlete coming into an environment and you're worried about politics, the best way to not worry about it is back yourself. Back yourself every day in training, back yourself every day when it comes to your recovery. And if you get into a position which politics is kind of standing in your way, you need the results to tell them to not talk. In the sense that if your counterpart is arguing that you have been subject to favoritism, it should be a very black and white, you had the race, these were the results, this is the outcome.
What does it mean to navigate the Olympic stream? What can we learn from the journey, the destination, and beyond? I'm Adam Creek, and this is Row Tokyo, exploring the past, present, and future of the Canadian rowing athletes on their path to Tokyo 2020. Get ready for the lightweight women's double. Here we've got Jennifer Casson and Jill Moffatt. Here's two young women with potential, but as veteran rowing coach Al Morrow would often say, all potential means it is that you haven't done anything yet. So here's two athletes fired up and ready to prove themselves at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. Jill, Jennifer, light women's pair. On your way to Tokyo, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
I want to start by digging into your past and where you come from. I see that both of you are from the Kingston, Peterborough area. Is that right?
Yes, I'm from Bethany, which is just outside of Peterborough, and Jenny's from Kingston.
Okay. Yeah, so tell me, did you have interactions as rowers in that area of Ontario, or did you only meet at the national team level?
Well, I didn't start rowing till university in 2011.
Okay.
So I started rowing at Western, and so I didn't really have that high school rowing experience. And Jenny rowed in high school and then went to university in the States. So I didn't really know who she was until she made an under-23 team.
Okay, so you met each other as an under-23s.
Well, kind of. So I started rowing in my second last year of high school, and I went to the States as a heavyweight.
Okay.
And when I was down there, I just pulled a couple ergs, and they said that they didn't say, but it was suggested that I might be a little too small to be a competitive heavyweight, which I completely agree with. And so I became a lightweight, and then I met Jill when she was in the senior quad, and I was in the lightweight double. And she's actually one of the first people that I met when I came to the center, and one of the most friendly people that I met when I came to the center after graduating.
Well, where'd you go to school, Jen?
I went to Tulsa.
Tulsa. Where's that?
It's in Oklahoma.
What did you study at university?
Oh, yeah. I did my undergrad in health sciences, and then I did my master's in health information sciences.
Okay. So Jill, health sciences, health information sciences. So are you looking to get into the medical field, making sure that, when we get vaccines, it's all put into some sort of centralized database and we can access it easily when we transfer across provinces?
See, that would be ideal, but I almost go the other way. I'm more interested in health policy and what evidence we use to create health policy. Yeah, so I'm kind of in the information field, but what we're doing with the information and how we're making decisions based on the information that we have.
So what kind of health policy do you think we should change?
I'm very interested in women's health policy.
Okay.
And a lot of that has to do with the research towards medications that women are taking, like heart disease and things like that. A lot of the evidence is based off men and not based off women, but then we take the same medication. So I find that stuff very interesting.
Well, that is fascinating because I know, in medical research, they often stick to the male trials because it's really difficult or it has been difficult in the past to navigate the female hormonal cycle.
Exactly. Yeah. And research is a lot better now where a lot of things won't get funded unless there's a variety in the people who are participating. But you almost see that kind of came up with COVID with the AstraZeneca when women were we're taking birth control, which has horrible blood clotting issues, way more than AstraZeneca. And yet this is now becoming a national issue. So I know a lot of women, when that happened, were well, we get birth control with a huge pamphlet of all the side effects.
Yeah, that is interesting. And maybe we can get into it because I'm actually interested in the women's health side of things, if you're interested in talking about it, because I'm curious how you as athletes manage your own female hormonal cycle.
I'll let you take this one, Jenny.
Yeah, sure. I give a lot of thought to it because I struggle as a lightweight. I always have, and I'm a tall girl, and I like to get a little bit buffy. And so with my period, I retain a lot of water, and any salt just makes it worse. But
so you retain, so to clarify, you retain water at a certain point in your cycle. So you retain it in PMS, or you
so about 4 or 5 days before my period and on my period, I will be at least 1 kilo to 2 heavier.
Interesting.
Oh yeah, it's interesting. And then, but the nice thing is I sweat abnormally large amounts. So I am always pretty comfortable sweating like at least 1 kilo. It's nothing, but that's just me very particular. Whereas a lot of other women will struggle to sweat like 0.4. It really just depends on your body.
Yeah, Jenny and I have very different sweat rates. She could sweat 1 kilo in 20, 30 minutes, and I would be struggling for 0.3.
And so just so that we're clear for everyone listening, you're lightweight rowers. What's the weight that you have to weigh in at, and what's the weight that you tend to train at? And explain that a little bit.
So our boat average is 57 for the double. In the lightweight single, you can be 59, but together we have to have a boat weight of 57. So,
which is 125 pounds for Canadians.
And I think this is kind of a hot topic, right? Because everyone's like, when they look at us, at least in particular, people assume that, Jill makes weight for me just because of the height. And we've tried and tested a couple things. And the thing about Jill is that she's very lean and she's very muscular. So for her to go down so much, to be clear, the maximum for a lightweight double is 59 and the minimum is 55. You can be below 55, but it doesn't count for anything.
And that's kilograms. Yeah.
Kilograms, yeah.
It just has to average 57.
Yeah, and you can't be above 59. So again, for Jill, it doesn't make sense for her to be like making all the weight for me because she's a weapon of her own. And it doesn't make...
A weapon of her own.
She is.
Jill Moffatt.
Hey, that could be the head of her next book. The title of her next book.
A weapon of my own.
A weapon of my own.
My story.
My story. No one else. And then I like to be like, I'm comfortable racing around 58, and we can kind of play around those targets of 56 and 58 come race day, but those are our, I would say, safe targets.
Yeah, we kind of just aim for those. And then it definitely, the way we do it is it's very much like we're complete partners 100% in it. So if I was struggling, for some reason, maybe I put on a bit of muscle or whatever it is. If I'm struggling, then she would help me out. If she's struggling, I'd help her out. So we very much, as we get closer, really check in with each other and say, how are you doing? Do you need some help? And then the day of, we just kind of split wherever we fall.
Yeah, split the difference.
And we also work quite closely, we should say, especially for the listeners who may not know much about our sport. Like, we are very supported by Rowing Canada. Like, we have access to top of the line nutritionists and physiologists. So everything that we're talking about isn't a shot in the dark. It's very scientifically directed based off our body composition, which we get every 6 weeks. Everything is targeted and we know what we're doing, so we can do it extremely safely. And if things were becoming unsafe, you would know very far in advance because there's a lot of signs. Massive dieting and sweating down way more than you can afford to sweat down. So for example, some of the science, we have done heat chamber stuff to prepare for Tokyo, and where they weigh us before we go in and they weigh us after just to see how much sweat we lost. So you can see from that what Jenny's sweat rate is. So Jenny will know in this amount of time, I can sweat this much, and I'll know how much I can sweat.
I just want to kind of speak to that as well, because I think you make a really good point, especially nowadays where there's a lot of, it's kind of a contentious issue about women and our bodies and how we manipulate them in sport.
So what's contentious about the issue? Explain it.
Everyone, like, girls are kind of in media supposed to be skinny and pretty, and, our weight and perception of weight is just messed up through what we see and what we're told and all that kind of stuff as women. you know, they have the beautiful people on Instagram and in the media. And so that's a whole other like
God
person
damn those
outside
beautiful people.
Yeah. Well, but it's true. It plays.
Yeah, it is.
Whereas men don't usually have that growing up, they do, but not to the same degree as women. So that's where
no, it's what they say. Women are sex objects, men are success objects.
Yeah, and I would say like the lightweight men probably have definitely similar issues, but for women, I think it's doubled down. So when the lightweight women's rowing, I think, does become a bit more contentious because you also get a lot more people, and rightfully so, and glad they're doing it, like the Zoe McBride from New Zealand who retired because she couldn't do it anymore because it wasn't healthy. So there are these stories, very public stories of, and as there should be, when it goes too far. And so that kind of raises the conversation of, well, is it safe? Should people be doing it? And people kind of have this stereotype of lightweights running around in garbage bags and crash dieting. And that's a very immature way of it. And some people do that. But I think there's definitely those stereotypes around lightweights, and they're crazy and they're cranky. And that's not always the case, especially at this level and the way that we try to operate at.
Like, at least from my perspective, I'm totally comfortable in sharing the fact that like I went through that whole episode of like really struggling and then going really high and then going really low and losing my period, and my period's pretty on and off. And I think that just comes with a maturity in sport. I mean, I think when I started lightweight rowing, I was like, okay, the girls are skinny. Like, that's kind of what I got from it. I wasn't a mature athlete. I wasn't very savvy when it comes to how to best put on muscle and calculate your food and all that kind of stuff. I was like, lightweight are skinny and then they go fast. And then upon reflection, and you're like, no, maximize what you get. So you switch the way you think about it from like getting to the weight target, and then like, you know, as soon as you hit the weight target, it's free game because you did it. It's no, like maximize your nutritional intake so you can be like the most optimal machine. And like take that word skinny and like throw it out the window. Take that word, anything to do with weight, and change it into fuel and muscle and just like being a machine.
Well, I love that. It's moving away from, you know, the aesthetic expectations of society and moving into this utilitarian mindset of my body is a machine and I can fuel it and I can control this body. I can change my muscle composition. And, you know, if I'm, you know, my period's not working out, I can figure out that problem, and I can work with people, and I can make sure that my body is working the way it's supposed to work, and then I can optimize it, and I can learn a lot from it.
And there's a notion that in some sport, I know in swimming and in running, in the past, in gymnastics, not getting your period is like a sign of success. Like if you don't get your period, you're skinny enough.
What? Bring me into this world. So this becomes, I just want to like, let me see, because this is new to me. So like you're hanging around with a bunch of, you know, high performance women who have to restrict diets for, you know, optimal athletics. And you're like, yeah, I haven't gotten my period in 3 months. And it's kind of like a bragging point.
I wouldn't say in high performance. When I first started being lightweight in university, or people be like, oh, there's just not a lot of knowledge, right? It's a little bit of an immaturity and they don't have the knowledge. So it's not really their fault, but people also think, oh, it must be because I'm training so hard. It must be because I'm just training so hard. So people kind of thought of it as, oh, that's a sign that I'm at weight because I've lost my period. Or that's a sign that I'm training super hard. And some people do lose their periods, and that might not have to do with diet, or, you know, everyone's so different, but it was a bit of just a lack of knowledge around what that actually does mean and the impact it can have on you. So I think it was just misinformation that kind of gets shared when no one really knows what they're talking about.
And so let's disseminate the information. So there's a young woman listening. She's, you know, 15 years old. She's dialing in, you know, she's getting used to having a period. She's getting used to her body and how it works, how it operates. What kind of advice would you give to her?
Let your body finish puberty before you decide anything about controlling or maintaining your weight.
I totally agree. Because I agree with Jenny too, because my first couple years of university, I also was doing a bit more partying, But being a lightweight was very, very difficult for me. And I was done growing like height wise, but I don't think that hormonally I was finished developing. And then after 2 to 3 years of rowing more, a little bit less partying, all of a sudden my body just like switched. And since then, it's been really easy for me. And so I think a lot of it is young girls are still growing so much that you don't want to start manipulating.
Well, that's interesting. So women, when did you feel like you stopped, like when you kind of fell into your own as an adult, I suppose? Because I picture women finishing puberty around 16 years, but you're saying university, so I'm thinking 19, 20, 21.
I would give yourself university. So when I went to university and I left high school, like I was a thick girl. But then, and by thick I mean like $170. And then over the course of university, I, similar to Jill, really enjoyed my university. So the first 2 years I put on more weight because I was living my best life. And then
brunches? What did you put on this? Like brunches and beaches.
Brunches and beaches and mimosas. But it's like I wouldn't change that for the world because I had a wonderful time and met amazing people. But then, you realize this is an unhealthy habit. And then if you can make changes that tailor to a more healthy lifestyle and you lose weight and you're like, oh, okay, like this is good. This is healthy. And then you see a downward trend and you kind of come closer to a different weight category just because you're being healthy. That's a better indicator than like coming into your last year of university and being like, oh, I want a scholarship to a lightweight women's rowing program, or I want to go to Western to be a lightweight women's rower. So I'm going to diet at 18 or 19 and then be miserable.
Well, what do you think? 'Cause I've thought about this sometimes because I haven't lived it as a lightweight and having to manage weight, but I've seen it externally. And I've thought, within rowing, weight is an issue, but height is also a limiting factor. What would you think about switching over the rule to say instead of being, 57 kilograms, you have to be 5'7", for example?
You couldn't manipulate that. You could not manipulate that. That's an interesting. I've never really thought about that. It's interesting because we have girls like Kaylee's probably 5'6", 5'7", and she can clearly hold her own in an open weight field. And same with, the Swiss women's single, Janine, I don't think is that tall. So you do have a lot of women who are shorter who really know how to move their body weight and have worked very hard, maybe because of their height difference. But I've never thought about that. That's interesting. What do you think, Jenny?
Yeah, I just kind of nodded my head a little bit and was like, oh yeah, wait a minute.
Instead of a weigh-in, you'd have like a height, like
measure in, right?
Yeah.
Here you go. Stand on your.
I think that's been
2 hours out.
Stand on the height stick. No, I think that's a really good point because the purpose of lightweight, right, at the beginning of everything was to get smaller countries included in rowing because they couldn't really boat 4s and 8s and whatever else. And the average human size is 5'6".
Yeah.
For better or for worse, it's now become just sort of the race of the crazies a little bit. But yeah, it's a really good point. Huh.
Tell me about how you manage your body composition and some of the strategies you use, 8 months out, 6 months out, 2 months out, and, leading into a taper.
Yeah, for me, once I came out of university or near the end of university, it was like my body just switched. Like I said, it just became a lot easier for me. So for me to hit my target of 56 in racing, like I won't sit much heavier than 59 at the heaviest. For me, my bigger focus is putting on muscle and making sure I can get like stronger and stronger. And ideally, I would like to be in a place where right now where I am, where I train at 58 kilos. And then I kind of, as we get closer, around 3 to 4 weeks out, I'll then just start making little adjustments to my diet. But because I can do whatever I want most of the year, it's quite easy for me to say then lose a pound because it doesn't employ me cutting out a ton of things. It's just little adjustments. So for me, that's kind of the method I use. And then as I get closer, I don't sweat as much as Jenny. So right before a race, I wouldn't want to sweat down a kilo. That would take too much for me. So usually what I do is what we call low residue, which means that 3 days out, you're kind of trying to get rid of the fiber in your stomach. So you're still eating the same amount of calories because you still need to perform and be fueled. But then you cut back on broccoli and salads or things like that because they have a lot of fiber and hold a lot of water in your gut. And you eat a lot more white bread, pasta, kind of all the things that, people don't think would help you make weight are the things that do because they don't hold any fiber. So I do that for 3 days. And then usually I'll lose a kilo just from adjusting my diet, maintaining the full calories, but just decreasing things that have a lot of salt and fiber in them. And then usually I'm there.
Well, it's interesting. And you can cycle, and that's relatively healthy to cycle through that as long as you're not doing that all the time.
Exactly. So luckily, I don't have to do that a lot.
Yeah. So tell me, Jennifer, what's your strategy? Because it sounds like you have to work a little bit harder than Jill, or differently. Yeah.
Jenny's also, to put it in context for people who can't see us, she's 5'9" and I'm 5'6", and she has quite a long arm span as well. My arm span is shorter than my body, so we're working with quite different proportions.
But we have the exact same size legs, so riddle me that.
Which is the craziest
part.
Part.
So crazy because then we squat, and I'm like, Jill can squat like what was your like max squat this year? Like something insane. I forgot.
I don't know.
It's like 80s, something crazy. And I am looking at her. I'm like, oh, like I should totally be able to do that too because I have the same legs as her, and I can't do it. And it's a huge area of sadness for me because she is an animal in the weight room. Anyway, yeah, I'm a bit different than Jill when it comes to weight. I fluctuate aggressively, but in the past 2 years, I kind of toot my own horn in being able to rein it in. I think we'll probably get into it later, but definitely the first 2 years of lightweight rowing, I didn't take it very seriously as far as like my nutrition and myself as a machine and training and
well, let's talk about it right now. Started lightweight rowing, and why didn't you take it seriously enough?
Geez, I am really fueled by doing things for people that I care about, and I need like a really big intrinsic, like soulful push, and that has to come from doing it for someone else that I'm rowing with and having like a full trust relationship. And I'm like a weird person. I just need to have like I keep on calling Jill my sister, and she'll roll her eyes when I say that, but like I need to have like my sister in the boat. Like I just need someone that knows me and can handle me essentially. And then I will give my everything. Like you will have my heart, soul, head, body, whatever you want. So in the first 2 years, because of the way things need to happen, you need to have a competitive environment, and you need to be rotating, and you need to see who's in Canada that can shoot for the 2 seats. And so that's just the way it is. So we had a bunch of girls in the training center, and I just didn't really know what I wanted from the sport. I knew what I wanted from the sport, but I didn't know how I wanted it.
So tell me more of that. You knew what you wanted, but you didn't know how you wanted it.
Well, the problem number one was I was like, I want to make the boat. And that is the first way to go backwards, because then you give your everything to seat racing, and then you get to a World Cup or a World Champ, and you're like, I already I cashed my checks.
There's training and there's racing, and there's a real differentiation between the two. And racing is a very peak experience. And, I'm of the philosophy that you can maybe peak 3, maybe 4 times a year if you're lucky. And if you peak to make the boat, then all of a sudden, once you get to the other side, you're like you don't have this, not just the physiological energy, but the spiritual energy, the psychological push, the inner fire.
I love what you're saying, and I'm totally there with you, because I burnt really hot and then I would just defuse. Or not, yeah, I burnt really hot and then I'd fizzle out. So the thing was, like, I would make a double, but then the time you're in the double, it's like, well, the next World Cup, you're probably not going to be the double, or like, we're going to seat race again. So there was no like, you're with your partner, you're with your girl, like, you're going to go and take on the world. It was like, you got the seat, but like, it's not yours, and you have to, we're going to come back and do it all over again, but like, have fun racing. And that to me was, that's not the wrong way of doing it. That makes some athletes tick. Like that's what an athlete needs sometimes. That's just not the way that I work.
At the time, it was a very fresh group as well, right? So no one has a lot of confidence that they can, it's just a lot of learning at the same time. So it's a combination of, I think it's really good to be on the edge of your seat and to have seat racing and have to prove yourself in practice. I think that there comes a time where, you need to focus on peaking for the right races, but at the same time, you still have to give your all when the sessions require that.
Let's set the stage for the listeners a little bit. So one of you was from Bethany. The other one is from Kingston. Yeah, Kingston. And then Jennifer, you went to Oklahoma or Tulsa, Oklahoma, and then came back and started trying out for the national team, did some under 23s. Jill, you ended up going to Western, walking on to Western, came through the under 23s, and then started competing. And there was a bit of a vacuum. You had Patricia Obi, Lindsay Jenerick, who had been strong contenders in the lightweight women's double and ended up winning a silver in Rio. So after Rio 2016, there was a vacuum in the lightweight women's camp. And that's what you're talking about. There's a vacuum in the camp. You're in with a bunch of other, lightweight women, and you're battling with each other, but kind of cooperating with them and looking to see who's going to be the double to go to Tokyo.
Yes. And I think what was different for us than, say, the open weight women or, say, other events where there's a bigger turnover is that none of us had either had any real success at an under 23 level. So in some programs, there may be turnover, but you have a under 23 gold medalist coming up. So someone who's, medaled at the junior or under 23 level. For us, none of us had that result either. So none of us came in either ready to go, knowing how to move a double the best way. It was a lot of learning, just even how to get to that level, never mind getting in the boat. There was a lot of things happening at once.
And so how do you find sort of like your status and your ranking, and how does that all sort out?
Before the year of 2019, so the last time we competed, we had at that point, for the listeners, the 2019 World Championships was the qualifier for the Olympics. So at the beginning of 2019, we had 4 of us in the training center. So what we did pretty early on, so we could allow a double to train, was do what we call a seat race matrix. So everyone rode with each other. So we did 3 races over 2 kilometers, 1 every day.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that way to establish a ranking. So
how many of you were in the matrix?
There was 4 of us. So we all set it up where every 3 or 4 days, we then switch partners. So we had some time to train together with each person. You kind of knew what you were getting into. And I actually thought the way we did it was really great, where we did it across 3 days. So, because with lightweight women's rowing, it's so tight and it's so competitive that you need to see how people perform over 2 kilometers. Our coach and I agree with this, thought that painted a better picture. So you needed also people who were able to perform consistently. So not just have one day where they hit it and the next 2 fell over. So we had 3 races over 3 days. And then that established a 1, 2, 3, 4. And with the 4th person being removed from that training group, with the 1, 2, and 3 going into the double and single for the World Cups. So Jenny ranked first, and then me in second place. So I came third. Unfortunately, we're quite close. So I came third. So I was selected to row the single. So then we probably trained for about 3 or 4 months, actually. They trained as a double and I trained as a single.
Who was the other woman?
Ellen Gleno. So they were selected into the double for a World Cup in Poland. And then, so the seat racing was done for that World Cup. And then after the World Cup, there would be adjustments if need be. And that period lasted about 4 months. And then we went to the World Cup. I had a good result. And then the double didn't perform, I guess, the way the coach envisioned.
Pause. You got a gold medal while doing your master's.
But in terms of what the coach saw, I had a good result. The double ended up in the C final. So then we were staying in Europe for the next World Cup. So then our coach put me into the double and took the second ranked person, Ellen, and put her into the single. And so that's kind of, then we had an okay performance. Like we won the B final at the World Cup in Rotterdam. I would have liked to do better, but then the coach had selected from then on, we would stay in the double for the World Championships.
Okay, and then you finished 8th at the World Championships.
So we were just off of qualifying, which was a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was brutal.
Yeah, so tell me about that race. Tell me about the 2019 World Championships.
Well, sometimes you don't know things until you go through them, and that is a perfect example of that. I think I'm pretty confident in saying that finishing position was the best thing to ever happen to us. Regardless of what happens in the future, it lit a fire under us that was that could only be done through failure. We were mortified by the fact that we had just missed out on qualification directly, but we knew from each other, and we knew we were going to get the best from each other going forward. And Jill and I have a very similar work ethic where it's you commit everything and you do every training session for the 100% in one area, mentally, physically, emotionally, whatever it may be. And it was like, in a nutshell, wow, that stings. This sucks. I'll see you in the fall. Let's get this ball rolling. And so there were a lot of things that weren't known about if we were even going to go to Last Chance, what the selection would look like, what going back to the training center would look like, if we were going to be allowed to train, like all the unknowns. But the one thing that we knew for sure was that like we had each other's backs, and in the sense that like we were going to put ourselves, like Jenny was going to put herself, Jill was going to put herself in her best position to be the best, to get the lightweight double where it needed to be to qualify.
And was there any conversations from Ellen to come in to say, hey, look, I want a shot at this. These two didn't qualify. If I was in the boat, we would have qualified, or I think we could have, there would have been a different result. That? So
the way Rowing Canada operated after the World Championship was 3 weeks later, we had our National Rowing Championship. Or it was 2 weeks later. So after a World Championship, Rowing Canada usually tells our athletes, okay, take the full 2 weeks off, which I always do. I don't train at all during those 2 weeks off. So we had 2 weeks off, and then we had a week back in the training environment where we were all going to go to a national rowing championship, and they were going to select people out of that to come into the Olympic camp. So because Jenny, Ellen, and I had all raced as lightweights 3 weeks prior, it was like unsafe for us to then go race lightweight after 2 weeks off, especially for peaking at the World Championship. So we were slated into rowing the heavyweight women's single.
When Jill said unsafe, like our nutritionist was like, do not weigh in again. Like, and our team doctor was like, that is not a good idea.
Especially after taking 2 weeks off. You're not going to spend your only 2 weeks of holidays throughout the entire year worrying about your weight when you're not training. It would have just kind of put the three of us completely backwards when we're trying to go focus on the qualifier. So anyways, long story short, we raced the heavyweight women's single event at NRCs. And then there were lightweights who raced lightweight event. And then the coaches with Rowing Canada ended up only selecting Jenny and I into the Olympic camp. So, and this happened with the heavyweight men, as I'm sure you might be aware, based off the performances at National Rowing Championships. A lot of the men who were originally training, at the World Championships and racing were then cut based off of that event. And there were a lot of athletes who were kind of left out of camp, and it was a quite upsetting time for the entire senior team because I think a bit of it was quite unexpected. And
was that laid out though?
No, not to the, yeah, you should always know. And Liam Parsons, he raced lightweight men's four, as you know, in Beijing. He gave me really good advice when I saw him before I went to it. He said, even though you're not going to be prepared for it, you can't let anyone beat you. He was like, you don't know what Rowing Canada will decide to do with it. And I do think if you are trying to make the Olympics and you're trying to perform at the Olympics, even though all of us were underprepared severely for this regatta, you still have to be able to try your best. And I think everyone did, but...
Well, I could see that being a leadership and a communication issue.
It was. It definitely was. It definitely was.
If you're going to severely cut people, you need to say, in 3 weeks, we're going to have the national championships, and this national championships is going to dictate whether or not you're going to belong to the camp and what's going to happen in Tokyo.
Because if that were the case, I don't think people would have gone home for vacation if they knew their Olympic camp was on the line. So I definitely think that was a leadership and communication issue. I am on the athletes council with Rowing Canada, and we did make that quite clear after, to the people who kind of were part of those decision making, and all of us, I think they really did hear that. So I don't think that'll happen again in the future. There definitely was appeals from multiple different events, and there were appeals from the lightweight women who came first, second, and third from the lightweight event from that event. And so ultimately, Rowing Canada decided that they would take in the top two from that lightweight women's single, which was two athletes. The first athlete said, yes, I'll come in. The second athlete said no. So then the third athlete came in to row with the first athlete in a double. And then me and Jenny were going to train in a double. But then eventually one of the girls quit. So then Jenny and I were selected to the double. So a lot of moving pieces.
Well, that is the gist of it. And it sounds, competitive and stressful and even at times political. Yeah, so let's talk about the politics of high performance sport, because it's very real. And in my experience, a lot of people leave high performance sport with a very bitter taste in their mouth because, they're not confident with the selection process, or they feel like there's favoritism that's not been delivered to them. And, politicking is essentially, people exercising influence and opinions to get what they want.
Yeah. I think when it comes to politics in high performance sport, all the young people that are listening, when someone says the higher you get up in sport, the more politics dictate what happens, that is true. But there are ways of making sure you fall on the right side of that line. And I'm not talking about favoritism and sucking up to your coach. I'm talking about working hard and figuring out a way to make yourself in the best position to not have to worry about politics. Kaylee Filmer is a perfect example of this. She is a rower who has had a slew of misfortunes, has had everything under the sun to set her back, and she's untouchable. So there's no question of favoritism. There's no question of maybe she just likes rowing with someone. Her and Hillary are untouchable. They made themselves that way. There's no politics there. So if you're a young athlete coming into an environment and you're worried about politics, the best way to not worry about it is back yourself. Back yourself every day in training, back yourself every day when it comes to your recovery. And if you get into a position which politics is kind of standing in your way, you need the results to tell them to not talk. In the sense that if your counterpart is arguing that you have been subject to favoritism, it should be a very black and white, you had the race, these were the results, this is the outcome.
And for me, I have been on the wrong side of selections where I've had to race a single at a world championship. And the one that we did for the World Cup made sense. Like I was third. It sucked. I was really upset because I had such a strong winter and I thought I would make the double, but that wasn't the way it was. But then I had a result that then got me into it. And when there was a time when...
So that was 2018 where you raced.
2019.
Yeah, our World Cup too.
Yeah. And then I ended up racing the lightweight single after being in the lightweight double in 2018. And I felt that one wasn't very transparent whatsoever. But then when that happened, I just told myself, I was like, you're never going to be in that position again.
So tell me this story. So you're in the lightweight double in World Cup 1, World Cup 3 in 2018, and then there's some reshuffling, reselections, and now you're racing the single at the World Championships 2018.
Yeah, we never really seat raced like each other the way we did, where it was so transparent the next year. Like when we did it in 2019, it was so transparent. You saw the times. Like when I came third, it was this amount. It was so transparent because I think they learned the best way to do it. Because I should say there's no great way to do selection. Whenever you don't make it, someone's going to be upset, right? Like I'm sure you saw when you were an athlete, when you don't make it, it does feel personal and it is hard to see clearly at times. But I felt like in 2019 when I didn't make it, although I was very emotional, I was like, you know what? The coaches, like the numbers weren't there to support me. I can't appeal this because I will lose.
So tell me the story of what happened in 2018.
We came back. Obviously, they the issue that we were having a lot with our lightweight doubles is that both performed almost the same all the time, no matter who was in it. Like no one was performing because no one would let the other person get ahead almost. Because everyone wanted to make it so badly when it made for great competition, but no one could step up and kind of blow everyone else away. And that's what you need in an event that's so competitive. If you have two doubles going the same speed, then you're probably not going to fare out too well internationally, because you really can probably just have one that's exceptional. So we raced two doubles at World Cup 3. And then after that, they wanted to do some more selection going into the World Championships. But we never really did a seat race. We raced some singles, and then we raced some doubles. And there was some weird stuff that went on. Like, it wasn't very transparent. And I was just kind of put into the single, I think, more to give another double an option to see what happened with them.
Well, and then I was, just to add on to that, two things. First of all, I think that, for instance, when you rode, Adam, it was very different because you guys had this environment that I'm speaking on your behalf, so please stop me if I'm wrong. But you guys had this amazing culture and amazing environment in which you would go out in pairs from your 8 and just like thrash each other. And then you just like have raw speed and just like raw, like, let's go boys, like every single day, pedal to the metal. And that worked for you because y'all were in an 8 and you all were on the same page about that, from what I interpret. However, with lightweight women, when you're vying for 2 spots and you're in a boat that has 2 spots and there are 2 other girls, it's just a total shift in dynamic. So you're constantly trying to think of like what's really happening in the other boat, what's happening with you, what's happening with your partner, yada, yada, yada. And to another extent, like with girls are different than guys, the more like emotional side of things, I think, kind of played, in which no one was the leader, so no one could kind of set the culture and set the tone.
Because no one was the leader because no one was significantly faster than the other.
Exactly, yeah. Mm-hmm. And there was just like no shining star. And I think what ended up happening in 2018, I pulled a fat erg, and then Dave, like the coach at the time, was like, okay, good job, now go prove yourself. And I'm the first person to say that ergs don't float. Good sweet Lord, ergs do not float. And I was on the right side of the seat matrixing, but by a little bit, like not enough to be exceptional by any means. And it just got to a point where, yeah, the double was made, the single was made. It wasn't argued because Jill's the most hardworking, and this is another reason why I like just love having her as a partner. It's because she took that and she didn't swallow it. She like worked with it, and she was like, wow, this is so unfair, which it was. And I can say that because I was in the double. It's so unfair, but she made our winter, the next winter, a living hell. She was on top of every single lightweight. She won every single piece. It was insane because she was in the single and she didn't like where she was, and she just worked her tail off to get to where she needed to be. And then Jill became the leader of the group. And then things started to kind of come into fruition because she was setting the tone of which she was like, no, that was not where I want to be. I'm going to go and crush every single day. And then the rest of us were either going to go with her or fall behind. And I was like, damn, that's what I want. I want to work with her. And so I went and tried to follow behind. That being said, 2019 kind of skyrocketed off the good old weight scale, popped up a couple kilos that weren't really healthy, got into the heavyweight program, and then came back. But nonetheless, like, she became the leader. And so from that point on, it's self-assessed. If you have a girl who's winning every single piece and who's crushing it, she's setting the tone and she's creating that environment of competition that's healthy. And so from that point on, again, she got a result that she didn't want, and she worked harder. But, you know, she's always a person that's told, you're too small, you're too short, you're too skinny, like blah, 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 blah. But people underestimate her spirit. And if you want to get into spirit and mentality, you should talk to Jill, because she took all of her not shortcomings, but all of her losses, and she just, another notch in the belt. And she just like kept going. And so as far as what happened after, I would be confident in saying the dominoes fell in the right order for Jill, and then she made everyone kind of come with her.
Okay, so walk me through that, Jill. So you're in either 4 lightweight women, you were in 2 doubles, you raced 2 doubles at World Cup 1, World Cup 3. At the end of it, the coach decided that Jennifer and Ellen, or Jennifer and Kate would race the double, and then Jill would race the single. And then you go out, you race light women's double, finishes 9th in 2018. You in the single finish 5th. And then you come back to the camp and, are you lit up?
Yeah, I was like, it was definitely after 2018 when I raced the single. I enjoyed racing the single. I was coached by Leslie Thompson Willie, and I like absolutely adored being coached by her. So it was, for me, ended up being like an awesome experience.
So tell me before we move on, tell me about Leslie Thompson Willie, because I'm curious about her as a coach.
She was awesome. I don't know. I am sometimes a deficit, a little bit type A. And so being in a single, she was like the best coach ever because she was so attention, like, and detail oriented. That for me being alone all the time, it was great to have someone that cared so much. She also coached the heavyweight women's double at the time as well. So it was really awesome. We all had the same training program from our head coach. So she didn't write my training program. Our head coach, everyone kind of had the same training program, but we'd make adjustments. And no, I thought she was a phenomenal coach. Her experience is unmatched. She had a story for every experience, and she really, I think, from being at Coxie, understands the mentality of athletes. And I think she understood me to a certain degree. So she kind of knew what I needed. And yeah, I thought she was awesome. I really, really loved having her as a coach.
Yeah, and let's just kind of go to Leslie Thompson's history for a bit. She came onto the scene, the Olympic scene anyways, in 92, won gold medal with the women's 8, but was out there before. I guess won silver in Los Angeles in the Cox 4, silver in Atlanta, the women's 8, silver in 2012 in the women's 8, bronze in Sydney 2000. She's got a gold at the World Champs in 91. And so you got a career that spans as a coxswain from 1984 to 2012 and 2016.
2016.
Oh my goodness.
5th at Rio.
She was in the 8 at Rio. Okay. And so now she transitioned from cox to coach, I guess, in this last quadrennial.
Yeah. And she also, though, did coach in the past. Like she had coached Lindsay or Obi at some point in the lightweight women's single. So she has coached on and off in between some of those Olympics in the mid 2000s, I think. And then she was coaching the under 23 women's 8 in 2017 and 2018 as well. So she had been coaching and coxing a bit throughout.
Okay. And so what did you, if you say the number one thing you took from her mentality, from her philosophy that you've integrated, what would that be?
The number one thing I took from Leslie, probably a lot of it was like she was very good at instilling self-belief. So in the single, sometimes I just didn't, sometimes I didn't feel as comfortable, and I would say, oh yeah, I felt a little bit uncomfortable at crosswind. And she was like, you don't say that, because then in your mind, you're going to believe that in the race, if there's a crosswind, you're not going to be comfortable. So she kind of really challenged your mentality, or like she would challenge statements.
Be careful what you think, because you might end up believing it.
Yeah, exactly. And so she was very good at kind of challenging you to think about the way you're saying the narrative about yourself and about what may unfold. And I really appreciated that. And then she also told me not to eat the gelato or eat outside of the hotel in Bulgaria closer to racing, because she was nervous, and I didn't get sick. So
perfect.
I think she might be on some stuff.
Control your food. Don't get.
Oh yeah, she controlled the controllables for sure.
Yeah, well, that's definitely a good thing. So you had Leslie, and your head coach was Dave Thompson at that time.
Yeah.
And so tell me about Dave Thompson as a coach, and what did you appreciate about him, and what did you learn from him?
I loved the training program we had. It's very similar to what we do now, and I think this is why we'll probably come to this, why we work really well with our coach, Phil Marshall. They kind of have similar philosophies. I guess the best way to put it is there's lots of long kilometers. So we'll do 26, 28, 30-kilometer rows. And in a lightweight women's double, that's a long time.
So that tells, how long would it take you to do a 30K row?
A 30K row, we usually go to Shawnigan. Jenny, what would you say moving minutes are?
Like 2:20?
2 hours, 20 minutes? Yeah. Of moving time. So we usually row 14K, or we do like a 2K warm up, row 14K, have a gel and some water, then do another loop. So I personally love doing lots of aerobic work. So I loved kind of pushing the limits on how long we could train. And we did a lot of that, which I enjoyed. But then also every Wednesday and Saturday would be a group piece. So it'd either be, in the wintertime, it would be appropriately, 6Ks, 10Ks, 4x4Ks, longer pieces, more towards that 6K. And then as you come into racing, closer to race style pieces and, bungee rows every Friday, weights twice a week. We didn't do as much cross training with Dave, which I think we would have probably benefited from just a little bit more.
Why?
We rode. I find maybe it's because we're in our 5th year of this all now with COVID. Cross training has been really nice. Not all the time, but in, every couple afternoons we can choose to, use stationary bike or run. And I think for us, like we're so focused, I find in our boat that it's a nice way to just train without thinking. And sometimes that's really good for us. So we can come back the next day and really give 120% of what we have. But on the flip side of that, one thing Dave did quite well was we did so much training that you learned how to efficiently move a boat as well. Because when you're fatigued, it just gets harder if you're not rowing well. So I think there's a time and place for both. But definitely with Dave, we didn't do near as much cross training. And things obviously have changed quite a bit because of COVID and the rules. Now, because we don't have a head coach anymore, our coach Phil makes our own training program. Whereas before with Dave, everybody was on the same training program. Yeah, I think the one thing that's been really great and maybe separates me and Jenny at times is I think both of our bodies adapted really well to the training program. So I feel like we're both extremely, extremely fit. I think we're both pretty proud of our 2K and our 6K. So we both feel very fit and we feel very, very strong. And so for us, it's learning how to move the boat well with that physiology. So the great thing about the program that we've had and over the past 4 years is I feel like I can handle any 2K racing. I feel like I'm going to be as a combination, we're going to be some of the fittest people out there. It's now the mentality around it and learning how to move the boat. So the great thing is now going to the Olympics, we're not trying to gain any physiology that we don't already have. We're trying to harness what we have and use it to move the boat in the most efficient way. So I think our blessing is that we feel physiology-wise quite prepared. And now it's putting the other pieces together so that at the end of the day, the boat goes from point A to B better than anyone else.
Each boat has its own finesse about it. So tell me about the light women's double and how you're learning to move it more effectively.
I'm sort of more of a power person. I just sort of like to go hard and hot and hope that moves about. I never really appreciated the beauty and the finesse and the elegance of rowing until probably this year, if I'm being completely honest. This is PG, so I can definitely say this one. I was known for rowing with a stick on my back, you could say. So I would row very upright and proper in my own mind, and my perception of rowing was what I did, very flawed. And I think something that Dave figured was, she'll get tired enough, she'll stop. I never got tired enough, and I never really stopped. If you look at lightweight rowers, they row beautifully, and for the most part, they look like they're not trying, when really they're dying, and they just happen to be so well trained in their technique, especially a lot of European crews, that it just looks flawless while they're reaching their max VO2, which is an accomplishment on its own. It was something that Jill and I noticed in our rowing. Again, we haven't had much success, so it was like, well, God, we're getting to the end of a race and we're so tired. We're killing ourselves, and our ERG scores aren't necessarily bad, and we're strong in the weight room. What gives? And we just sort of pondered on this for a while, and we just we're like, oh man, we're not rowing well. That's just what's happening. We are not rowing efficiently at all. Like we're throwing everything at it, but we're not getting any bang for our buck.
I always felt, sorry to interrupt, Jenny, I always felt like at the end of the 2K, we'd be so tired, but it never felt like the way you do when you finish a 2K on the erg. And I know that's never the goal, and it shouldn't be, but we never felt like we could truly put our physiology into the boat. And that was because of our technique. We were getting tight in the wrong places. So that was a sign to us that we really needed to look at the way we are rowing. And that's something our coach has focused us on. And so for lightweight rowing, like there's no perfect technique. You can't, look at someone and say, you need to row like that. You need to row to your strengths. And that's what me and Jenny have been working on is, okay, if our fitness isn't the issue, how do we use that the best through our 2K race? And how do we get our technique to a place where we can allow ourselves to use that physiology?
And I think that's something that we're so excited to race for. And like, I'm getting tingly just thinking about it, because in the past, it's been like, we're going to race and it's going to be fun and we're going to try and win. I mean, we haven't, but that was like the mentality. Like, you're going to go, you're going to try and win. And, A plus B equals C, pretty much simple. But now we've reframed entirely how we approach racing. And because we've worked so hard on our technique and we've just worked so hard as a partnership and put in like more than just physical, like, it's like, no, we want to have a wonderful experience. We want to have a great race. We want to love every minute of it, love every minute of the pain, just like enjoy what we're doing. And if we cross the line and we put down our best race, we will be so happy with that. That to me was when I realized, at least for me, I was like, wow, like rowing, when you said earlier, you were in a point, Adam, where you're like, oh, why do I row? Like, why am I doing this? Why am I out here every day pulling on 2 sticks, or 1 stick in your case? Well, you do it because it's wonderful. And there's no feeling of getting a boat to sing. You can't replicate that in anything else. When the boat is happy and it's flowing, you're having a great time. And the beauty in that, and if you can make that fast, you can't ask for much more. So as opposed to in previous years, 2019, 18, 17, whenever it started, and it was like, let's go race, let's go die, let's go, go hard the whole time and not remember any of it and get out and just black out, which is all really cute, Jenny. But why? And so now it's like, no, like, let's go, like, live this moment. Like, we can do this. Like, we've gone so slow. We have gone so slow to go fast. And if you can make it going that slow for that long to go fast, you can have the best race of your life. Because let me tell you, when we started working on our technique, wow.
Well, so tell me what you're focusing on when you're working on your technique.
For me, I'm working on not having a stick on my back and listening to the boat and listening to what I'm supposed to be doing instead of forcing it to happen and forcing the boat to run.
So when you say don't have a stick on your back.
So she's trying to say it in a PC way. She had a stick up her butt, so she didn't use her torso. So she got great length because of her arm span and her height, but she wasn't able to use her torso to help move the boat. And when you're in a lightweight event, I think the biggest thing for us, you need to use everything. That's the difference. Everyone's 57 kilos. Everyone's boat is the same weight. You need to use from the catch to the finish everything you have in the right way sequentially. So our biggest focus as a crew is, one, always moving together, because I feel like that you can see a lot of different boats who row a lot of different styles, but if you can do it together, that's the I think one of the hardest parts.
So where do you focus on matching up?
Yeah, the biggest point for us that we've been focusing on this year throughout is the 90 degrees in the knee where we put power.
When you feel your toes, when your toes come to your heel at the catch, and then you're pushing through with your, you go from quads to glutes and hamstrings, and you're getting the most pickup on the boat. That's where we really like to make sure we are like the absolute most together.
So you're really picking up together. So you've, the blades have gone in, they've locked into the water, you've created that mound, you've got the hang, your torso is over, it's engaged, and just as the toes are pushing forward, knees are 90 degrees. And at that point in time, you're starting to like squeeze it together. You're starting to hit it together. You're starting to squeeze it.
Squeeze and then into the swing.
Into the swing. So how do you think about the swing when you think of the swinging together?
We think about squeezing the glutes so you're sitting up and the power is not being hindered as it goes forward. So it's basically a bike chain. So you want to keep the chain constantly moving with no disruption. The biggest thing that a lot like that Phil has said and Dave said was that if you put the boat in the water, it would float there and it would float with the water. So any impact that you have is either going to help the boat or make the boat slower. So if you can keep the chain going smoothly, the boat's just going to gain speed and gain speed and gain speed. And it's about keeping it in a happy spot.
Well, because even though, I guess, physically speaking, when you're looking at the boat from the outside, it's still rising and falling. But you're, mentally speaking, you're trying to keep that boat out of the water.
Yeah, but you're trying to limit the rise and fall as much as possible.
We try to, pick the boat up when it's moving as fast. We're trying to do all of that, not putting anything on the boat that shouldn't be there. It would look like we're just trying to tick the boat along. It doesn't feel like we're just ticking it along physiologically, but it's just picking up the boat with as little disruption as possible.
So how do you do that?
For us on the recovery, it means being as loose as possible. Once you get your weight, so once you extract the blades and your left hand's going out and you get swung over onto that front edge of your seat, we then try to think as loose legs as possible, not keeping the muscles that are about to be on the drive very tight. So we try to keep them super loose. Yeah, loose quads, loose feet, so then we can feel the boat coming towards us, because the boat will tell you when it's ready to be picked up again. So if you're tight in your hands, tighten your feet, tighten your quads, you're not going to feel that boat coming towards you. So we don't think about then going to the catch. We think the boat's coming under. We need to be set up in full length so that we can be ready at full length to take the catch again.
And so when you take the catch, how do you take it? So you've let it glide. Your legs are relaxed. You're floating up. Hands are up. Tell me about taking the catch.
So the catches, at least for me, is a struggling area because I like to have my chest up. But in the past, I've had a lot of hip problems. And something that's really important in the double is that you get over on your hips and you don't have a tuck in your butt, so you can have your core engaged.
So when you say a tuck in your butt, is it more of a lordosis where you're
so like a scoop under. So you're not strong. You're pretty weak. And I very commonly rode like that, and worked a lot on my mobility, and am now able to perch up. So the idea of sitting up, being rocked over, but fluidly have rocked over, not mechanically, and very, very tactfully going up over in the position, arms out, outside the boat, and plunk in. Now that sounds very easy. But if you miss the boat, you're missing the entire load. And so plunk and hold is a concept that I am trying to work hard in the boat and match Jill with, because Jill is getting it really well in the bow, and as a stroke seat I can get the rhythm just fine, thank you very much, but that plunk press is sort of my working area.
So the plunk press is the pickup.
The plunk press is the pickup, yes, but it is the catch drive sequencing,
and it's having the patience. Like when you put your hands up at the catch, it's low elbows that are loose, your shoulders aren't going with it, the hands are rising, but you want the blade to be fully covered before you're pushing off. And that's the tricky part. As I'm sure you know, Adam, you don't want to start pushing on the feet or moving your arms before the blade's fully covered. So you want that to get buried, have the patience to then hold the suspension and then use the big muscles.
Well, I don't know. I would do it slightly different, because we would have blades with pitch on them, and trust the pitch of the blade, and trust that if I started pushing when the bottom inch of the blade was buried, and if I was loose and relaxed enough at the catch, and the longer I would get, the easier it was for me to pick up the boat with the run. And so it was constantly like, get longer. It was slightly different in the 8, because we'd have a longer poise over the catch to make sure everyone was matched up. But in a smaller boat, you almost need more quickness around the catch.
Yeah, and problem with the smaller boat as well is the longer you try and go, the way you can go in a sweep, the longer you try and go like it with that sort of same concept in a sculling boat or in a small lightweight boat, is you just start to over compress because there's not really much more room to go. So if we were to try and like lean out as much as possible, we would change the way our body position is at the catch. So we wouldn't be able to take it with the same load and magnitude force going through as you can sort of leaning out with your 7 crewmates and like swinging back and going to the finish. If that makes sense. Because at one point we were trying to get out as much room as we could cover with our oars, but because we would have to be a little bit more rigid to get up into that length, and at one point you'd have to tighten up to sort of get your arms out that far, you would then almost sky up dip and then go in and press. So you'd miss water, which is not worth it in our event.
And then you have to come back on your foot plate because you've come so far forward up on it that you're kind of missing that. It's all about, the accuracy and efficiency.
Do you have those new shoes that clip in so you can get full? Do you want them?
No, I think that's just overcomplicating things for us. Like, I think the simple, the better. We have a Felipe boat, so they don't have the clip-in shoes. And we have different feet angle and feet heights to maximize our different flexibility. So, there are things we look at there, but we've had the, biomechanics on our boat. And so for us, length isn't an issue. It's just being able to apply force right away.
Mm-hmm. So you want to pick it up quickly and get the force on very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not too quick where you shoot the boat. So you're like elastic band, not like you want to like stretch it out, not like pull it so fast you like snap the band.
Moving with the boat, not imposing yourself onto it. When we row our best, I feel like the boat is telling me I don't even have to think because the boat is just moving and moving and moving, and you could just keep the momentum and it feels like you're flying. When you don't get it right, the timing gets a little bit off and you're ahead of it, you're behind it, you're forcing it. It feels like you're trying to fix something, but you can't fix it.
So how do you get from that point? How do you get from that point of, okay, you're off?
So I'm not going to make a joke out of this because it's something that Jill and I have been working on very, very hard. So we're both pretty like strong personalities, as why we get along so well. But we also are very emotional and take things really personal in the boat. So if I feel something, and in the past, if I felt something, I've been like, Jill, I feel this. I feel like you're doing this. And I put it on her. But I'd also be thinking about things that I wanted to work on within my own head, but that I would output, Jill, you're doing this. And she would hear it as, Jill, you're rowing like crap. And then Jill would say something to me that she wanted us to focus on, but I would hear it as, Jenny, you're rowing like crap. So fair enough. I probably was rowing like crap, but it's not going to help me emotionally. We also row very differently. I feel like I speak different. I think about it differently. I communicate differently than Jill. Jill, it can see what I'm doing, can see what's going on outside, can see the oar pattern, can see my body. She can see everything. So we come from literally different seats. So when it comes to communicating about what we want the boat to do and what the boat wants us to do, we've now started to say, like, this is what the boat's doing. And then from there, talk about how we can help the boat not do that or do that better, which completely removes the personal side of it. So neither one of us gets hurt.
So that's a kind of a communication adaptation that you've moved towards. So instead of saying, Jill, you're hitting the catch too hard, you're saying, oh, the boat's feeling sticky at the catch, or it's feeling sluggish at the catch, or we're overworking the catch.
Totally. I mean, I'm in the stroke seat, I'm in my own world. Like, I'm sitting up there and I'm like, la la la, like everything's fine. I'm setting a rhythm and we're going great. And oh, it's not feeling too great. Like, I'll change this, and she'll just like, she'll see what's going on and say it. But that doesn't tend to work out too great, because often I'll find when I think Jill's doing something wrong, I'll get frustrated and I'll be like, Jill, you're doing this wrong, in my head, when I'm doing it wrong. I'm the one causing the problem.
But then you think about it and you don't vocalize it.
Well, exactly. And then I'll be like, Jill, like, do this, or like I'll say something and she'll be like, okay, and she'll just like do it, and then I'll be like it didn't work, and then like we'll take a couple strokes and I'll be like, oh man, like I wasn't getting my catches in, like I was messing this whole thing up, da 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 da. So like, for instance, the other day we did some 1,500 meters, and this is fresh, so it's probably going to sting a little bit. They were pretty bad. And we came off the water, we finished the pieces and we started rowing, and I changed something and I was like, God, that was all my fault. Like, I messed that entire session up. Because we had been talking about how the boat was moving, we both realized that the boat was not moving well. And so that was done and dusted. We figured that out. But then the next step of figuring out how to not make it be like that, I couldn't identify. So we ended up going through the session and just like hammering it out and then realizing after what the problem was. So step one, in steady state and in regular practice, we can communicate like that. But now it's the next step of when we get into a race setting, how are we going to make that sort of communication work?
So how will you? Like, tell me your side of how do you make the communication work, Jill?
Yeah, for us, it's interesting. Like, we get along so well in the boat and then off the water. And I think a common misconception about us is that, like, because we get along so well, we get along all the time. But how, as Jenny said, like, we're both quite strong people. So sometimes it is difficult for us because we care about each other so much. Sometimes it's hard for us to communicate sometimes in the boat. So it's actually been really good because we are quite honest with each other. So it's been something we've been continuously working on of how do we word this in ways, how to be really honest or say a lot about it is just being very vulnerable. So if you come to the boathouse and all of a sudden you notice that things are putting you on edge that shouldn't put you on edge, then it's saying, hey, just so you know, I might be a little bit quiet this row because I'm being a bit of an asshole. And it's not you, it's a me problem. Because there are days like that. We're kind of like in a marriage. Because I'm sure, Adam, you're married, you spend all this time with your wife. There are days where, you're just not in a good mood. And I think for us, it's no different. And we're tired and we're competitive and we're trying to be perfectionists and get things right. So for us, it's being very honest. If you don't feel 100% like yourself that day, it's kind of being honest and saying that. So in a race setting, that almost goes a little bit away because things are so dialed in and you both have one kind of big focus and goal that usually by the time racing comes, the communication isn't much of an issue. You're also a bit more rested as well. So, those emotions don't get as high because you're not as tired and there's a little bit more controllables, I think.
So something that is really helpful is that if Jill comes or I go, oh, I'm not having a great day, I feel so comfortable saying that. And Jill still knows that I'll go out there and I'll give my 100%. Like, I might not be happy and I might be cranky and you might want to hit me, but I'm still going to go out and try my best. And that is what I have committed to since day one and what Jill's committed to since day one. So that's a question we don't even talk about. So when it comes to racing, we're so on the same page when it comes to that the concept of what are we working on today is irrelevant because we're both working on having the best race that day. Whereas in training, it could be Jill's working on X and Jenny's working on Y, and Jenny's in a bad mood, but we're going to go out there and Jill knows that she's working on X and she knows that Jenny's working on Y. And that's the purpose of that session.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when it comes to racing, it's like Jenny and Jill are working on X together.
Yeah, because you have, like what you're saying, you'll have different technical focuses, like you were saying, okay, the hip swing over or the way to pick up the boat or the way that your hands are carrying or the way that your blades are off the water or...
Exactly.
A huge thank you to our title sponsor, Nutella Wealth, the gold standard of investment advice for affluent families, foundations, and institutions across North America. Nutella Wealth is also the premier partner of the Can Fund 150 Women, where women support female athletes and each other to achieve excellence. Nutella Wealth also has their own podcast, The Wealth Exchange. This show is full of great interviews and inspires you to achieve your aspirations beyond wealth. Providing access to experts, topics explore leadership impact, wealth planning and investing, philanthropy, and building better businesses. Listen to The Wealth Exchange with a quick search for Nutella Wealth on your favorite podcast listening app. Let's talk about New Zealand stepping out and your boat being acclaimed. Yeah, and you not having to go through the last chance qualifier. Walk me through that story.
This whole year has been so up and down, right? Because we've already kind of been through it before. They didn't even know if they would have a last chance. So being in the position we've been in, being the next qualified boat, being that 8th place position boat, before when they were discussing if there would even be a last chance, we always were like, well, if this thing got canceled, we would probably be called up if there was a scenario like that. And you can do basic math. If they go off the last qualifier, we knew we had put ourselves in a position. If anything had happened, we would be the next boat. So that was always in the back of our minds, not as a hope, but just as it's a realistic situation with COVID that we have to consider. And then when we saw that the stroke seat of the New Zealand, or the bow seat of the New Zealand double had retired, we did know, okay, that's gonna, if they don't claim that spot, that will have an impact. And we didn't know when they would do that, if they would do it after the last chance. No one knew how that would play out. So we knew that things may change, but we didn't know how.
Why did she retire?
Because for her, it was unhealthy to be lightweight anymore. She suffered like a series of injuries, and she made like the brave choice, especially after being a world champion. She made the brave choice of saying, this isn't good for me anymore, which I can't, like, kudos to her. That took a lot of bravery.
Because it was too difficult for her to stay at weight and train at this level. And she said, I'm choosing health over this pursuit.
Yeah, I don't even know. I wouldn't go as far as saying it was difficult. I think the bigger thing was that it was unhealthy. Her saying, no, I'm taking my health first was, I think, a wake-up call to what lengths people would go to get to weight. And her doing that was just such a noble decision as far as the younger generations who are looking at her as a legend, which is they should, and saying, wow, like, that is how important my health is. Like, my health is more important than this sport.
Physical and mental health.
And mental. And it's not one of those cases where it's like, oh, she wasn't tough enough. Like, all that kind of archaic way of thinking of mental health as fluffy. It was absolutely not that. This woman, rather, I should say, is like, you can't put words to her accomplishments, right? And especially in our field, it's very hard to be that good for so long. And to have someone like that say, mental health is so important. Here's what I'm doing to be happy and healthy. It was like, wow, take a bow. Like, everyone look at this. So I think something that I want to say on behalf of Jill and I think Jill will agree with me, it wasn't like we were sitting here being like, yahoo, like Zoe isn't racing, like we get the spot, yippee yippee. It was like, oh my God, the top lightweight is stepping down because of mental health. Like, that's huge. Like, that is so sad. On one side, it's amazing, and we just can't give her enough credit for the decision. But on the other side, it's like, oh my goodness, like, this is true. This is real. Like, this is. So we were very sad to hear the news because it's horrible, and you wouldn't wish on anyone. That's not the way things should be. And unfortunately, that is the way it is for her. And we wish her the best.
They couldn't find someone else, or they did try to find someone else, and it wasn't up to the standard of the stroke seat. She had actually said, no, we're not good enough to be racing at the Olympics. So they were going to send a double, but she said, no, we're not good enough. So they decided to not enter a lightweight women's double. So then we officially got the call up. So it was very shocking. It weirdly was a bit bittersweet because we were so excited to go race because we started feeling really confident. And part of me, now we won't race until the Olympics. So part of me was like, crap, like that was our chance to race. And I kind of wanted to really say any doubters or anyone who thought that, maybe we weren't good enough to make it. I wanted to go and rock up and win. Like, there was nothing I would have loved more than to been like, yeah, like we're here and we're ready to present ourselves as, we've been working so hard. So it was sad not to go and do that. But at the same time, we weren't vaccinated. So the relief of not having to travel was huge because we didn't know what quarantine would look like on the way back. If we got one false positive test, we're not even racing at last chance. So in the COVID era, it was I was very happy to not travel in that sense. Sad I couldn't race, but very happy I didn't have to travel.
So they're canceled, you're claimed, and now you're going through the preparations. What do you picture training camp to be like in Japan?
I think it'd probably just be, for me, it's just going to be an extenuation of what we've been working on. We're really lucky working with Phil and the women's pair. Like, that's our group. So we do most of our training together. So I just see it a continuation of what we've been doing been working on, and just fine tuning, the higher speeds and building a lot of confidence. I think at that point, it's not going to be about trying anything new. We're committing to our race plan because we know it's the best way we race. So when we get to Japan, and it'll hopefully be a little bit exciting. Things are starting to happen. It'll be our first time off the island since Christmas of 2019. So that'll be awesome. But I'm just excited to keep training over there and then hopefully have a good run into Tokyo.
Tell me a little bit about Phil and how he's preparing you for Tokyo.
He's
like,
great.
He's like the anchor to our crazy. Like he makes things so simple. It makes, like, at least from my perspective, like sometimes Phil will make things so simple I feel stupid for thinking about something a certain way. Because he's like a magician. Yeah, he's like a magician when it comes to planning and not making you stress about it and getting the best out of you without making you know he's getting the best out of you, and always making the session, it has to be worth it before he changes it. He says something along the lines of like, when you there's really rough water and it's cold and it's rainy and you shouldn't be going in the water, but you do. You have to be able to get 75% of the product of your workout out, or else it's not worth it and you should go cross train. So with decisions like that, I trust him through and through. And that can be a tough decision because there are times where it's like, it's really windy and you're like, is this worth it? I always trust Phil to make the right call. And injury too. Like if you're feeling a niggle or whatever else, it's like, is this worth it? I don't know. But Phil always knows whether or not it's worth it.
So give me an example. Give me an example of where the two of you have overcomplicated.
Oh my God, this morning?
Lay it down. This morning. Tell me about it.
Okay. So this morning, we got on the water and I started rowing and I was like, oh man, like I'm rowing and there's a golf ball under my butt and I can't pivot. And I was like complaining about it. And then I raised my hand. I was like, Phil, like, I can't pivot. I can't get over. And he was like, what's happening? And I said, well, there's something that's stuck in my bum and I can't get into my position. He's like, go in, have Trish see it. Whereas I think some other coaches would have been like, oh, tap it out. Oh, keep rowing. Oh, see what you can do. And that's what I wanted to do. And Jill would have done the same. I think, I don't know, Jill's better than me with that kind of stuff. But anyways, he's like, go in. And so we went in and then Jill's like, I'll go back on the single. Jenny, you go see Trish, who's our
Physiotherapist.
Thank you, Jill. And so Jill goes back on the single, continues the workout. It was a bungee session. And then I go see Trish and Trish examines me and she's like, oh man, like your SI joint is stuck. Like you can't move. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And so she like does a bit of manipulation, whips it, puts my leg back into place type thing. And I get like this spasm all the way down my shoulder, down my back, and like down the side of my leg. And I was like, oh, that feels really good. And I was like, can I go row? And she's like, yeah, go for it. So I went on the single and finished the session. And I rode so much better. And I was so happy. Thanks to Phil, he knows us and he knows like our tolerance. And so he knows when to make the call of whether it's worth it or not. And that's just a prime example.
He never doubts our effort because I think we've also proven that to him. Like we've earned his trust and he's earned ours. Like he knows that we're willing to do like whatever it takes to get the boat to go fast. So I think he does a good job with knowing that when to like hold us back from ourselves. And I think a good way to also explain his coaching philosophy and the way he's coaching us is after we watched the qualifiers, we all kind of sat down and he said, what did you notice? And we talked about, exciting races, this and that. And what he said is, the boats who do well row with confidence. He's really in tune with having confidence and not that fake it till you make it, but the freedom, the mental freedom to go out there and to perform to your ability. And you could see the crews that rode scared. They rode tense. They rode like they had something to lose, not something to win. So he's very in tune with, are you being free in the mind? What is your mental state going into this? What do you want out of this? So I think that helps us be very introspective and are we putting things in our way? It helps us filter through that.
On top of that, something else that we should really credit him to is at the beginning of this whole pandemic, when literally no one around the world knew what was going on. The first thing that came out of Phil's mouth when we were with him as a coach was, it's not about the crews that are going to train the hardest. It's not about the crews that are going to row the best. It's going to be the crews that are the most adaptable who are going to do well in this regatta. And he was like, I can't tell you what next year's going to look like. All I know is that it's going to be so different and it's not going to be normal. He's like, scratch any thought you had about this being normal. And because he prefaced our entire next 2 years with that mindset, we have been able to overcome so many things that 2 years ago, a year ago, however friggin' long it's been since COVID started, we would have made it into like the biggest ordeal ever and just, you know, worried about it and blown it out of proportion. Whereas now it's like something comes our way. Okay, that's, you know what? We expected it.
Can you give me your best
impression?
Phil Marshall impression, yeah.
Oh my God. The other day when he texted it in the group and he was like, he gives us like little blips about what he wants the session to look like and what we should be focusing on. And then sometimes he'll have like real good one-liners. Sometimes he'll have jokes that he thinks are funny, so he kind of laughs to himself and, you know, he does this little dad thing. And then other times he'll have like one-liners that are just like absolutely savage, but he won't realize it because he's Phil. And so the other day we were like getting up at the start line with Kaylee and Hillary, and he just like randomly was like, oh, and if the boat is 27 kilos, so if you're making it slow, it's not, or if you're making it feel heavy, it's not the boat. And we were like, whoa. That came out of left field. And we like all kind of looked at him and he was like, what? Like he didn't even second guess it, but to us we were like, that was pretty savage. Like
well, and again, if we dissect that comment, he gave the onus of responsibility to each of you, and maybe you were overthinking it and you're blaming it on maybe you weren't taking enough personal responsibility.
Oh, for sure.
And so he's calling you out. And
for
he's
sure.
able to call you out in a way that you're like, oh, crap. Yeah, it is me.
100%.
It is my fault.
100%.
And you know, Adam, on Elk Lake, the boaters get out there. Now it's that time of year, all the pleasure crafts. And sometimes the wake can get bad. And if we're like, oh, Phil, this is rough, he'll be like, well, call Tokyo. Tell them to cancel the wind. Call them to...
He loves that one.
Oh, yeah, better tell them that they, you know, he's very good at kind of throwing that back at us in a playful way where we're like,
oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah, we get it.
So how do you think this, you know, you'll take this moving forward? Do you feel like your mindset is changing, you know, under Phil's tutelage, under his guidance?
I feel like it just puts everything into such a better perspective.
It's very simple now.
It's so simple. And the powerful ownership that Phil has given us to have on ourselves and on our own results is something that at least I've never experienced, and I've never been so reflective on how I'm making the boat the best for my people and for the boat and for Jill and for Phil. Like, that's what I mean when I say my people. So like in the past, it's been very much a selfish pursuit, whereas now I think it's a selfless pursuit, and it's about getting off the water and knowing what you did well and knowing what you can improve every single day, and then reflecting on that every single week, and then checking in at every race series and just staying really honest and real with yourself about where your mind is, where the technique is, and where the boat's headed.
So what kind of lies do you catch yourself telling me?
Oh man. Gee. What kind of lies have I told myself? Probably like if my ego's nice and big, I'll be like, oh, like I'm strong, like I can afford, this is in the past. Don't worry, Jill, I haven't thought this in a long time. But in the past, when I would get annoyed with the person that I was rowing with or annoyed with my result, I would very much find myself being like, oh man, like I pulled an erg, like this should be easy for me. Like, why isn't it easy? Oh, it must be the rigging. Like that was my go-to. It was always the rigging. Always. It was something was wrong with it. And looking back on it, that's so embarrassing, and I'm not proud to admit that. But like, oh yeah, like I'm so strong, it must be me, it must be the boat, which was completely incorrect because I was rowing like a donkey.
Yes. So that's great. Well, let's talk about Tokyo. And who do you anticipate being in the race with you? How do you anticipate the regatta going for you? What result are you looking for?
I think for the lightweight women's double, there's no crew that's, I think, favorited to win. New Zealand at 2019 was ahead of the rest of the field at that regatta. So without them in it, it really is, as with most lightweight racing, and I think at the Olympics, from what I've seen and heard, things do change, and it's been 2 years. So it's a bit of a different question, I think, for us than it would be in a normal scenario. Like this will be our first time racing since our world championships in 2019. So I think for us, we know that we're a very, very different crew in terms of our physiology, in terms of our technique, in terms of our mentality and our partnership than we were in 2019. So we don't really look at that result and say, okay, we were 8th. How do we come, 5th? Instead, because we really have nothing to tell us otherwise, we're definitely going in there trying to medal. But our main goal is, and we've kind of talked about this, I want to row our best race. And I know if we row our best race, we feel confident, we execute what we plan to execute, I know that the being on the podium can happen. And if that doesn't happen and we execute everything, then that's all we could have asked for. But maybe I'll eat my words, I don't know, but I do have a confidence that execution will put us in a position to race for a spot on the podium.
Yeah, what Jill's saying is totally true. It's very easy for anyone to say, oh, I want a medal. Like, that's everyone that goes to Olympics, I would hope, wants to get on the podium. And then hearing 2 girls who finish 8th and have no history of medaling, except for Jill in the single, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, these girls won a medal and they got 8th. Yeah, okay, like, whatever. That's fine. Like, you can think that. You have a right to think that. But that's not what we believe. And we'll be damned if we're told otherwise until we're finished the race. And like Jill said, there's nothing to tell us one way. There's nothing to tell us the other. We know the improvements we've made. We know what we've gotten out of each other. And we know what we have in the bank. We're just really ready to get over there and test her out, execute it. Like, let's go.
The worst thing we could do is do a heat and be like, that didn't go as well as we wanted. Let's change the race plan. Like, once we get there, because like, obviously you'll look at some tactics, and we'll use the races around us and what's happening, but we're really going to try to hone in on like what we've planned on executing. And if we're going to get to point A to point B as fast as we can following our race plan. So we're going to try when we get there to really make sure we stick to that no matter what. And if that's not good enough, then it's not good enough. But we're very confident in believing that that is good enough to get us, what we want.
Because we don't know what anyone else is going to do. And when you get to the Olympics, we've never been. So all we can control, and the only way we can keep it simple is do what we have been doing and do what we know we can do. And then make that the best it can be. So it's not rewriting the 200 and however many strokes you're doing. It's making, and this is a big Phil-ism, it's making those strokes that you have implemented over and over again better than they were the time before. Not changing it up, not, adding a move here or a piece there or a call here. It's nope, you did it 95%, you make that 110%. But you do the exact same plan.
Do you feel very motivated by the competition, or are you motivated by, say, the challenge? And when I say the challenge of having your best race at the Olympics, or the competition, to beat the Americans, to beat the French, to beat whoever else is in the race.
I think the motivation to beat them would be because we respect them so much. So beating them would mean that we have outdone them in a sense. That ideally we beat them when they're at their best. That means that, we're just better. We've achieved, greatness. But I think I guess we haven't really talked about this, Jenny, but the way we talk about it isn't, we don't really have one rival or anything like that. For us, it's just all about.
Our rivals are ourselves.
Yeah. For us, it's just living up to the potential that we believe we've had. Because I was this Al Morrow quote that's potential just means that you haven't done anything yet. And I feel like we know we have the potential to have a boat that can cross the finish line on the podium, but we want to do that.
And I think something else with lightweight rowing especially is that there isn't really a boat that I would peg 100%, put $1,000 behind to win. And I love that about this event.
You can't count anyone out.
Can't count anyone out. And to be able to be a part of that, I genuinely really respect and adore our competitors. I think a lot of them just are so, I don't know. I feel like because they go through what we go through as far as lightweight is concerned, I just have to respect them. But it's I if they can be the best that they can be on that day, and we can be our best the way we can be on that day, and our best is better than their best, I think that's what we should be going for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get what you're saying. And so then if you're going for the best, because there's the intrinsic reward of sport, sport in for sport itself. And there's the the extrinsic piece of, yeah, it's nice to win, and that, I guess, it makes you feel good. It's good for the ego, good for the accolades. Could you have your absolute best race in the B final?
Yeah.
It could happen. Yeah.
I would say, like, if we're in the B final, hopefully that means that we had our best race in the semifinal, but it just came up short. So ideally when we're there, we're going to have our best races possible. But if our best races possible only put us in that position, then there's nothing we could have done to change that. Like with COVID and everything, Jenny and I never went home. We've done as much as we possibly could to put ourselves in the best position because we were so hungry after not getting qualified that we know that there's really no stone unturned. We have great training partners in the pair. We have a great coach and we have a great partnership that if we're in the B final and we felt like we executed all of our races, I will extrinsically probably be disappointed, but intrinsically I will be satisfied.
Yeah, like when you talk about like lies that you tell yourself earlier, and excuses that people can make, I would be very disappointed in both Jill and I if, say, after Tokyo things don't go well for us, whatever that means, and you came up to us and you heard some excuses come out of our mouths. I would be very disappointed in us because I don't think that that's something that either one of us would feel comfortable saying. There are no excuses if you're just not good enough.
Well, be good enough. Well, and honest with the result when you win, honest with the result when you lose, honest with the result, regardless, and, figure out the growth and what it's teaching. What is it teaching us?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Own it, man.
Yeah. So Tokyo's done. You've had your best race. Ideally you've podiumed and you're coming out of there. You're moving on to the next thing. What is the next thing? Do either of you have another Olympic cycle in you? Are you moving on to, career after sport?
For me, I love rowing. I feel like right now I'm still improving. Like, I feel like I can still get fitter. I feel like I could still row better. I look at Paris and I'm not thinking, oh, I'm not going to get any better than I am now. I feel like I haven't hit that ceiling. So physiologically and mentally, I feel like I could keep going. For me, though, I'm 28 right now. I'm in a long-term relationship. So for me, I would be finishing the next Olympics at around 31, 32. And I want to have children, but then I also want to have a career. So for me, the family planning and that kind of stuff becomes a little bit more real and something I really have to consider. And I finished my master's in 2019. So then if I wrote 2024, that's almost 5 years out of doing school. Like that's a long time. Then I want to have a kid. Those things start to kind of, I wouldn't stop rowing because I didn't like it and didn't think I could accomplish more. I would, depending on how Tokyo goes, that'll also influence my decision. And I don't know how I'm going to feel after Tokyo. I just don't know what that'll do. If that'll be like, I feel satisfied here. But for me, the family planning stuff becomes a little bit harder. So I think after I'm going to go home to Ontario, definitely for a while to spend time with my family. And ideally, I would like to get a job. I'll be coming back to Victoria because my partner works here in Victoria. So I'll come back to Victoria, BC, no matter what. And ideally, I would love to get a job in the field that I'm interested in. And then after doing that,
healthcare policy.
Yeah. So if anyone has any leads, hit me up. But after 5 to 6 months of that, I think I would be in a better position. So I haven't ruled it out, but I think for me, I have to consider a little bit of what life will look like afterwards, especially with having children. Like if I was a guy, I'd be like, oh, well, there'll always be a job. But
well, I don't know. I would say we've had a lot of these conversations as men too, because what I saw was that I saw a few people who had children who competed, and they were either absentee fathers and did really well, or they cared for their children and participated and didn't and had substandard performances. And you have the choice to stay up all night with a screaming colicky kid or, recover for the next training session. What are you going to choose? Well, obviously you're going to choose the kid.
Obviously, yeah. And so for me, it's not a consideration of would I have a kid after this Olympics? I'm thinking after the next Olympics. For me, I'm excited about my career and I want to start working. So I don't want to finish. This is me just spitting off what's going through my head. I don't really want to finish at 31, 32. Yeah. I would at that point have to start thinking about having a kid just for my biological clock will start ticking, but I also want to work. So that if I work for a couple, that kind of puts me older and older as I go down this. I feel my life is planned out already, but just things I have to consider. So I haven't ruled it out, but I definitely will have to do something in the field that I'm interested in as well. Whether that's part-time, I will have to do something so that I can set myself up career-wise afterwards. But I definitely haven't ruled it out because I think Paris would be awesome. And it would be so cool to have the full Olympic experience, which I'm so excited that we're going to the Olympics. I wouldn't change it for the world, but it would be quite exciting to have, the full
crowds.
Yeah, crowds, your parents there.
The ceremonies.
Yeah, the after parties. Like, I feel like I'm getting robbed. So that's my long, and I love the after parties. So this is the worst thing to happen to me. It is the worst. So yeah, that's something I think about.
I'm surprised it took you that long to get there. I was like waiting for it. Like, come on.
You're talking about having kids and after parties really close to each other, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So there's a lot of things, but there's
a lot going on.
So Jenny's in a slightly different position. That doesn't make it any easier.
Slightly. No, it's way easier for me. You're kidding? I am. Praise the Lord. I'm gonna come back. I mean, the thing about our partnership is that, like, I love rowing with Jill, and I'll have a very hard time finding someone who I'll be as happy and open with. So coming back without Jill terrifies me in the sense that I just know I wouldn't be as happy, but I'll be more happy if I were to push Jill into coming back. So for me, her and I have to make up our own decisions completely on our own. I really, really miss my family, so I'll be going home for at least 6 to 8 months because I haven't seen them in forever. And then I'll try and get a job because I would love some extra income because I'm so poor. And definitely some school because I'm going to have to further my education. And I feel like because we spent so much time concentrating on technique and how to row and all the things that you have to be hyper focused on, I would love to sort of take a step back in the first couple years of the quad and just be able to juggle both a little bit better and see what that sort of is like. Just have a completely different quad than this one, and see what else I can get out of myself. And then, if year 3 comes around and it's not looking promising for a lightweight double, then I'll probably just bow my head and say my thank yous. And yeah, I mean, it's an open field. I have not made up my mind for sure one way or the other. I definitely think I'm going to give it a go. If I get beat, I get beat. If I don't, let's see what we can do. But it's going to be much more be your best. And if that's not, again, the same kind of concept we're going into Tokyo with, be your best. And if that's not good enough, you need to figure out a way. And if you can't figure out a way and your heart's not in it and your mind not in it and your soul's not in it, you need to back out. Because you're not going to get anywhere without those 3 things.
That's great. Well, let's talk about funding because that stuck out. And I know the one of the sponsors for this podcast is Nicola Wealth, who funded the Can Fund 150 Women Project. And I know each of you received money from that. So tell me what that means to you, both philosophically, women supporting women, and then just realistically on the ground. How much money did they give you? And
$6,000.
$6,000 and what that means.
First of all, shout out to Jane. Obviously, Jane is a rock star. And yeah, Jane Roos. And none of this would be possible without her. And I feel like I'm saying that like an advertisement, but like I'm just saying it because it's true.
Yeah, as rowers, we don't get the sponsorships that track athletes can get. Like our income is just the karting, which Jenny, what is it a year? Like $20,000 a year, and you're living in Victoria, BC. Like it is very hard. You're not doing this for the money or the payday. So people like Can Fund, when that's money that Canadians are donating to support Canadian athletes, it's like, and they're happy about it. Yeah, it's not like you're just getting $6,000 from, a sponsorship to where, something. It's like you're getting this money from people who believe in Canadian sport and are legitimately just trying to make your life easier. So it's incredible. And then, yeah, the women supporting women is obviously huge too, to know that $6,000, which is like 1/4, almost more than our income, like that it adds on to, is coming from other women in Canada who want to see women in Canada succeed in sport. I think it's really cool and it's really unique, and I really wish a lot of people knew more about it.
Yeah, because it's like it means so much to us on a level of like obviously the financial level, but the community, like the people that I get to associate with because of the Can Fund 150 Women, like she's a rock star. Like after this, I'll be able to reach out to her because of Can Fund and ask her questions about her job and her career. And like I would never have the opportunity if I didn't have Can Fund. Because like how would I ever connect to her? Hi, my name's Jenny. You'll never have heard of me, but I'm interested in your business. Like, oh no, there's actually a platform and a connecting bridge to like a whole other field of your life.
Mm-hmm. You know, the networking opportunity and what can be achieved by that. Yeah.
Yes, so imperative.
And that's like half the battle for us, right? That's what I'm kind of talking about with me with careers, when we're just for the most part really focused on rowing. You don't get a, you know, in university when I was doing my master's, because I was rowing full time with the senior team, I couldn't really go to those events. I couldn't go to those, you know, go to those things where I could make those connections. So having a way to make connections while still rowing is like very something that I think is underrated, and it really does help us. So the connections I think are irreplaceable. And then even this year, like if you said boots on the ground, like because of Can Fund, I was able to buy a road bike and a really good trainer hookup for it for indoors. So because we had to buy our own equipment and we weren't, you know, there's no gyms open, without Can Fund, I wouldn't have been able to buy a road bike, and I wouldn't have been able to buy a trainer for when we get blown off the water. So it's really made during COVID, the training so much better.
People are going to hear this and be like, oh, these girls are just like tooting Can Fund's horn. But it's like, no, man, like you don't get it. Like we're so poor. And if you get that extra $6,000, it's not like we're going to go on a shopping spree. It's not like we're going to go travel. I don't know. When are we going to travel, man? Like we don't have time for that. We're not going to Cancun. Like we're going to go spend that on food, on fuel, and on equipment. I don't know how to say this in a way that doesn't sound like a 1-800 donate commercial. It's like this thing actually changes so much for us. Yeah. Sorry.
Hear it loud and clear. And it's I resonate. It resonates with me too. It's you know, it's same sort of thing. You know, rowing, you don't row for the money, at least you shouldn't. And you don't row for the fame because you don't
have any of that either.
And you don't row for the status or the power because
you feel like you have none half the time.
Exactly. Well, unless it's power in the legs and aerobic power and anaerobic power, and so you know, there's something bigger and there's something deeper, and you know, having people support your journey through an organization like the Can Fund actually recognizes what we're building and what we're actually building with sport, and you know, truly what we're building is character. And really what I think donors are supporting, they're supporting those epiphanies. They're supporting those moments where Phil Marshall comes to you and says, you know, focus on what you can control. And, you know, says, well, the boat's only 27 kilograms. So
it ain't the boat.
If it feels heavy, it's not the boat. And, you know, those sorts of epiphanal moments you probably wouldn't otherwise have until you were older, if at all, in your life. So this kind of gift becomes a character development that hopefully sticks with you through the rest of your life and becomes a tool in your tool belt to help you achieve great things, not just in your sport, but in
others.
You know, the other 70 years you have on the planet post-sport.
And in a day of which like influencers and TikTokers and all the pretty makeup girls are, you know, at the head of both like children in elementary schools want to be YouTubers and TikTokers, and that's fine if that's what you want to be. But Jenny Casson is just going to say that this is only my opinion, but if I hear a girl saying, "Oh my gosh, I want to be an athlete," there's something inside of me that like wants to cry. I'm like, yes, thank you. Like power is beautiful. Like use your body, you wonderful woman. Like become part of this community of strong, beautiful, and just like join us on this crusade of women power. And I'm not trying to, you know, I think what people can do with makeup brushes is amazing. And what people are so creative on all the media platforms, but something physical with your body, something emotional, something mental, something exhausting. It's just like there's nothing like it. And sport gives you that opportunity to express those things that are so in your DNA and in your core and in your like evolutionary, I don't know, development. I don't know if that's the right way of saying it, but it's something that you can't formulate with words. But it's just like something that you can't get out of anything other than sport and exertion, adrenaline, the rush, the feel, the love. And when I hear like girls being like, oh, I want to be an athlete. Oh, I want to use my body. Oh, I want to be part of a team. I want to compete. I want to be the best version of myself. It's like, yes, like you can do it too. Like, don't let anyone tell you can't. So I feel like the network of Can Fund just like backs up that statement so well.
And so you're saying the network at Can Fund, it's a network of other female athletes?
Just women who are being exceptional in whatever field they are in.
And so what do you learn from the other exceptional women beyond just, it is powerful simply just to see someone 20 years older than you who's established a career and has figured it out in her own way. What else have you learned from that network?
There's not one path to greatness. Like you can go so many different ways and get the same result, and you won't know what you need to be your happiest until you get there, and no one can tell you the right or the wrong way.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's, you sparked a thought when you're talking about, Instagram and, everything that's sort of blasted out towards us, but you almost get to open the kimono and see behind it when you get into a network like this, because you'll have a ton of successful women who have charted their own path. But, if you're only looking at the world through Instagram and TikTok, you're basically seeing the people who've figured out how to be famous on Instagram and TikTok, not the ones who have done other really fantastic, rewarding, interesting things with their lives.
Yeah.
And almost through like the Can Women's 150 Fund, you actually get to see that face to face and say, "Oh, this is
yeah.
Look at all those options."
Yeah, you see excellence in different ways.
Well, I think the two of you are enormously excellent, and I wish you the best on your journey, to Tokyo and beyond. And I thank you for taking the time to have this conversation.
Thank you.
What a conversation that was! Lots of energy, lots of insights. We went down a few rabbit holes, including better training for women, and that in relationship to period cycles and better understanding that and how to dial that in. That's still something I'd love to explore more and learn more about, as it's actually quite fascinating. The more you learn, the more you become curious. As well, it was interesting to get into some of the technical aspects of the boat, of the lightweight women's double. Each boat does row a little bit differently, and it's interesting to listen to these athletes and what they were working on to get more flow, to get more rhythm and flow in the boat, and how to, leverage the physiology that they've built and figure out how to channel it into a result that they'll be happy with. That, and also some great insights from Phil Marshall, and I will remember that one. The boat only weighs 27 kilograms, so if it feels heavy, it's not the boat. Look at yourself. So thank you, and we'll see you next time. Executives, business owners, this is for you. This is for you because you might experience career anxiety or overwhelm that leaves you feeling like you may have a heart attack. Or maybe you have increasing thoughts where you're questioning your career path and maybe you need a new one. When I'm not recording podcasts, I'm using my best radio DJ voice to help high-performing business leaders across North America align their work with who they are so they can achieve unprecedented career success without anxiety, without frustration, and wanting to quit their job. You'll discover, clarify, and implement personal and career strategies that move in parallel and increase your earnings, accomplishments, and quite frankly, life enjoyment. Don't quit, fail, or worse, waste years of struggling to achieve your professional ambitions because you're experiencing the inevitable rough waters of business and professional life. Get more information at my website, creekspeak.com. That's with a K, KREEKSPEAK.com, to learn if executive coaching with me is a good fit for you. Thank you for listening to Row Tokyo. Again, I'm your host, Adam Creek. Feel free to reach out to me with comments on Twitter at Adam Creek. That's @ADAMKREEK. No, it's not like the river or the squeaky door. It's a creek with a K. A huge thank you to our title sponsor of this podcast, Nicola Wealth, the gold standard of investment advice for affluent families, foundations, and institutions across North America. And another thank you to Whitehall Rowing and Sail and the Oar Board, which is the transportable, collapsible rower that you can take anywhere. Thank you, Rowing Canada, for your support to wrangle these athletes, and thank you, CBC, for promoting these conversations on your massive platform. This show is produced by the wonderful Mary Chan of Organized Sound Productions. The sound is edited and mixed by the creative Danelle Cloutier.